all the data shows that 70% of customers are actually interacting with more than one channel through that buying experience. And 50% of these sales actually get started with that customer on a marketplace. So it really is critical that brands and retailers adopt a connected commerce strategy and make sure that they truly are meeting today's customer where they are buying.
Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Today we have a special guest, Patrick Allard, who is president of fulfillment services at Essendant, where he's transforming a legacy B2B distributor into a connected commerce engine. He's scaled revenue operations and logistics at companies like Nugistics, Pitney Bowes, and Radial, and he's seen every flavor of growth from M&A, consolidation, to the ever-changing and evolving e-commerce space. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate being here today. I've really been looking forward to this.
It's been a long time, Patrick. We've been trying to get you on the podcast for a few months, and Dan and I have been counting down. So really excited to have you on. Looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, Patrick, as mentioned in the intro, you've really been in the industry for quite some time, which I can appreciate. We could all appreciate. And you've seen a lot of things. You've seen rapid change, consolidation. So your career really tracks along a couple decades of evolution within the supply chain and fulfillment space. You've certainly grown as well, obviously now heading up as president as Essendant. So would love your thoughts and the insight as to, through all that change, what has remained consistent, if anything, and what's the same and what's opposite from 20 years ago?
Yeah, no, great question. And, as I reflect on the last 20 years, there is a lot of similarities. And if I were to think back to the startup days of Nugistics, all the way to the acquisition of Pitney Bowes of that company in 2017, and then certainly moving into Radial and getting to where I'm at now with Essendant, the things that remain consistent would certainly be focusing on the end consumer. And then if I think about the other things that just remain true and how I approached each of these roles, really people and process. So really building the right team around us to align with that strategy, and then making sure that we had the right processes, everything from the front end sales process all the way through a successful implementation. But then how do you retain those clients and make sure that you're again, really helping them execute their strategy, which in this focus of e-commerce and retail and omni-channel logistics, focusing on that end consumer has been incredibly where everybody's been focused.
So I'd love to maybe dive in a little bit on that, Patrick. Everyone talks about connected commerce, but most organizations that we see still run fulfillment and tech and revenue ops like they're separate departments. Based on all the conversations that we've had in the past, it sounds like what you've been doing at Essendant is truly trying to close that gap, and you've made some strides. So what does connected commerce truly mean, according to you, and what's the objective of it?
Sure. Well, number one, we believe firmly that it's a strategy, and it's a winning strategy for brands, retailers, merchants. And connected commerce to us is really about creating that frictionless end-to-end ecosystem that is taking on the front-end tech piece, but then ultimately marrying it and plugging it in with the back-end logistics. And it's everything from product discovery through the purchase cycle, all the way through fulfillment, delivery, final mile, returns when needed, and really making that as seamless as you possibly can for the end customer experience. So it's really to just make sure that that back-end logistics does not become the afterthought, and that fulfillment really is an enabler for growth across all the different marketplaces. At the end of the day, all the data shows that 70% of customers are actually interacting with more than one channel through that buying experience. And 50% of these sales actually get started with that customer on a marketplace. So it really is critical that brands and retailers adopt a connected commerce strategy and make sure that they truly are meeting today's customer where they are buying.
Makes sense. And where do you see usually organizations that are trying to make the shift and trying to align fulfillment with modern customer success expectations? Where do they usually get stuck, and why are they not able to move forward?
We see a number of things. One is certainly making sure that your tech platform is the right platform, and that you really can break down the silos across channels. So if you are truly moving across channels and you're selling on social locations such as TikTok shop all the way to a marketplace, but also have either brick and mortar or your direct to consumer, having the tech platform that is fully integrated across everything from order management to WMS in order to TMS, and just making sure that all of those things are connected. So that way, when your fulfillment operations or fulfillment partner is executing that perfect order, you really have everything working in a unified way.
Yep. That's a great point. I think the last time we were chatting, Patrick, there was a stat that we spoke about, which was only 29% of supply chain leaders say that their technology investments have created truly integrated fulfillment experience. So for the audience listening in, what this means is if your WMS, OMS, customer systems don't talk and they're not connected, basically what you end up having is, siloed friction, and you just don't have visibility into what's happening and why it's happening. What Patrick is talking about is uniting all of them and making sure that you have a truly customer-centric experience, and technology is the driver for it. Patrick, I think the reason why you view this as a strategy, I think, is also because of your background, which is you've run GTM and commercial functions inside organizations. So this is a rare combination because it gives you the ability to have a view into how fulfillment gets framed, but also funded. So as you've worked on, maybe repositioning fulfillment from just cost containment to a lever that can drive, retention, conversion, expansion, what have you had to do? Can you maybe share some examples of, how did you go about unlocking this next level for your organization?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And again, understanding that where today's customers are shopping for the brands and retailers that we represent and we partner with, really understanding that, and then knowing that there's a lot of complexities, and many of these brands and retailers, as they go through this strategy of connected commerce, they really sometimes don't know where to start. They have blind spots in how they're going to be able to manage the complexity of various marketplaces and selling channels. And then on the back end of that, take a company that was built up in B2B wholesale distribution that have run into this D2C execution and really putting that together. And that's really been the transformative part of this, of connected commerce, is having the digital piece, which is part of it is experience and execution, having the industrial scale across 20 plus facilities that can operate, whether it's direct to consumer, marketplace, dropship, or retail. And then I'd say the third thing has really been partners. We've really built up our partner ecosystem to make sure that all of these connections to these selling channels could be established and could actually work for our retail partners. And just knowing that every retailer has a different approach or they have different systems, and having enough flexibility in the partnership ecosystem to be able to either build a new connector or tap into a strategic partner that, as part of their business, is connecting to all these marketplaces on the front end.
Yeah, love that, Patrick. And I think one of the things with your experience that we wanted to dive into was, you mentioned the companies, you mentioned a lot of M&A, a lot of transition that took place, which is common. And actually, we're seeing a lot of it today as well. With those GTM motions and everything, you've inherited operations that were maybe mid-integration or maybe post an acquisition or maybe in the middle of a transition from previous 3PL to new 3PL partner. And, the one thing I've experienced too is 3PLs are generally in this gas pedal mode or in this like, hey, we need to kind of fix some things that aren't going perfectly. We've all seen our fair share of unprofitable accounts, and maybe that was because the custom engineered solution didn't maybe hold true to what actually happens on the warehouse floor, or maybe there was some inaccurate scope that was shared during the sales process. So one of the things that I'm hearing too in the market is like, hey, how do we know when to pour gas on the fire and really go for expansion? And when is it time to maybe take a step back, pause, and get the house in order? So from what you've seen, would just love your perspective on, when is it time to accelerate? When is it time to maybe rethink what we're currently doing?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely the case. And as you know, Dan, with your history in this space, it is a very fragmented space, and there is a lot of change in our market in general. And, from my experiences, when you get into an organization And first you ask yourself, what are we really good at? What can we say that if we exited the market tomorrow, what would the market miss with us exiting this market? If the team can't answer that question, then they probably don't have a good idea of what they actually do really well today and where they're providing value. So I think once these 3PLs and fulfillment logistics companies can truly be honest with themselves and assess what they're good at today, and then take an opportunity to really review end-to-end systems and align on what your strategy is go forward, and really understand what it's going to take to either maintain that level of brand recognition and service performance, because at the end of the day, it's all about the perfect order out the door for the brands and retailers and protecting that end consumer experience. But yeah, usually you can put gasoline on it once you have a stable foundation that does include technology, systems, billing, truly an end-to-end system, and then align with what your strategy is. If you're trying to get into new verticals, new markets, if you're trying to attack different channels or segments, because each one of those could come with different requirements and different needs, right, for that customer segment. So before you go there, you really have to be on stable footing and really understand what is your identity today and what do you want to be in the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think what we're seeing is where the 3PL community is having success is when they are laser focused and they no longer adopted the spray and pray and really try to be everything to everybody. And they're really focused on doing a couple things really, really well. And the hardest part is knowing when to say no, right? And when to pass. And maybe while we're on this topic too, you know, most of the opportunities that come across in the mid-market enterprise space are very RFP driven, obviously, and they're sometimes led by procurement teams where decisions are made on the penny or the fraction of a cent. It really comes down to cost versus maybe alignment, whether that alignment is cultural fit and certainly expertise and solution. And would love to know what you're seeing in the market today too, because when you switch a 3PL, not only is it costly, but it's very disruptive to your business. So I'd love to see hear what you're seeing on that front as far as the evaluation process. And is there anything that's changing that you're seeing?
Yeah, no. Yeah, we do. I would say if I were to think back and just take a deep dive into, let's say, the last 15 or 20 deals that hit that upper mid-market enterprise that our teams have worked on at least the last 12 months on the Essendant side, there's a few things I would say that are clear. I do agree cost continues to be king. At the end of the day, again, the end consumer, they put us in a tough position in the space because they want free shipping and they want low cost, but they also wanted it yesterday, right? Or at least in 2 days. And, we know who we can probably thank for that customer behavior change, but it does make it challenging for these brands and retailers to ultimately try to get the best order experience, be able to sell across these channels, but try to find a partner that can lower their cost in the process. And that's challenging. So one of the things that we definitely have seen, or I guess more of a strategy for us, is to try to work broader across these organizations and really understand where can they unlock new sales and where can they unlock growth. And maybe the RFP was written in a way that it's very focused on your storage cost or your activity cost, and of course your final mile parcel cost, which is probably the highest cost basis on a percentage basis, but also where you've seen the biggest increases over the last 5 or 6 years. But actually take a step back and say, how do we help you grow sales, and what channels are you missing opportunities in to either grow net new sales or improve profitability and visibility into these sales channels? So that's one thing that we are very focused on for the deals that we work in. And some of the times we're really successful in uncovering that, hey, our integration with TikTok or our ability to do Amazon Seller Fulfilled Prime can actually reduce cost and how they've been looking at it. And it just really forcing them to look at the business a little different, or the opportunity in the business, by partnering with our connected commerce strategy versus just looking for the lowest cost provider.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that. And since you brought up Seller Fulfilled Prime, that was something the 3PL market was talking a lot about in 2018, 2019. And, if we fast forward to today, you don't hear too many 3PLs talking about it. I have scar tissue from it, from a 3PL's perspective. I've seen clients get penalized when performance hasn't been, to Amazon standards. Are you seeing many 3PLs even attempting to take on the challenge of a seller fulfilled prime offering? Or are you seeing like, hey, because of the challenges, because of the network that's required and all the types of integration, that most 3PLs are kind of backing away and maybe telling their clients, hey, what's best for you might just to use FBA and just let Amazon do the fulfillment and we'll take care of the other channels?
Yeah. So first, I would say that number one, there's still a demand in the market because there's still quite a bit of pain for the larger brand retailers that might have a really good dominant market and brand recognition, but they want the Prime badge, but having that inventory all locked up in Amazon and not being able to use that inventory to sell across other channels is certainly puts them in a financial challenge because you do have to buy more inventory and hold more inventory to execute that strategy when you can't unlock the inventory. So historically, that's been one area that we find a lot of value in and helping brands and retailers through that process of moving out of FBA and being their operational and digital partner. The other areas, certainly there's fees, there's other pain points around delays getting the inventory into the FBA network. So look, Amazon does a lot of things really, really well. There is opportunity for brands and retailers that want to have a different alternative view on how they can maintain a seller fulfilled Prime badge and leverage a partner. To answer your question on do we see a lot of companies doing this or a lot of logistics partners? No, I don't. And it's because it's hard. And if it was easy, I think a lot of them would be doing it, but it is incredibly challenging to execute. You really do need to have the ability to not just execute that perfect order experience within the 1 and 2 day metric that Amazon holds you to, but you also have to be able to help optimize that inventory because you truly need between 13 and 15 locations in order to really get that 1 day coverage.
That's the number now.
Yeah, for standard items. So there are different rules for different size items, whether it's an oversized item, standard item in the Amazon universe. But yeah, between 13 and 15. And we certainly don't require our clients to have to ship into that many buildings. We actually do, as part of our offering, we're taking that inventory from a few origin points, and then we're using our inter-facility dedicated transportation to move that inventory around, and we're leveraging our systems because, again, we were built out of the wholesale world. We've been doing this for our own private label stuff. We've been doing it for Staples for many years. So we've been doing this, let's call it, for ourselves internally with our own products with Amazon, and we've been able to really figure out what works and be able to now offer those capabilities to the market, which it is unique. It's a unique solution, but it requires a lot of muscle and also a lot of digital brain power to manage all those metrics and make sure that we're not putting Prime badges in jeopardy.
Yep, makes sense. Speaking about metrics and complexity, Patrick, this year has been extremely complex with lots of ups and downs. And as we think about metrics and alignment, one of the studies that we came across was that only 40-ish% of fulfillment teams report that there's alignment between the KPIs that they have to the actual business outcome that they're expecting, which I think is a huge gap. And I think the challenge is not that we don't have data. There's lots of data. Sometimes the problem is that more data actually makes things worse because more doesn't always mean better. How have you been able to focus your teams on the right signals, the right, cross-functional signals that can correlate with that business outcomes in this connected commerce era? So, not just looking at the operations, but also looking at the output, the revenue, the expansions. One of the anchor KPIs that we always hear about is on time in full, which again is still a good KPI, but the kind of complexity that we have to tackle when it comes to fulfillment, I think needs to go beyond that. So would love to hear your thoughts on, what are some of the ones that you really love to keep top of mind and have your teams anchor on as well?
Yeah. When you are executing a connected commerce strategy for brands and retailers, that does by nature mean that you have likely more complexity because you are the operations partner, and in some cases, digital and operations partner that is truly fulfilling across multiple different channels at the same time with the same inventory. So if they really are executing the strategy and we're their partner, there's a few things that we continue to focus on because, to your point, there's a million things you can track and it is data overload at this point. If I were to just maybe focus in on three key areas that we're working with our partners, our brand and retail partners on, and then certainly internally, we do still remain very focused on that customer promise metric, and that is, shipping on time and getting the order delivered on time at the highest level of accuracy. At the end of the day, if you're not getting that right, then it's not going to work, period. But there are several other metrics, and I'll just name two other ones that we're very focused on. The inventory health metric is one. When you have a client in your operations that is trying to make that inventory available across many different channels, you really do need to have some strategies in place with inventory buffering and a few other things that we watch or we deploy in those situations just to make sure that that stock to sales ratio is healthy and that we're not running out of inventory in a certain building that you have high demand for on a marketplace. That inventory availability, we call it inventory health metric, but there's several kind of dimensions to making sure that each of our clients has a very healthy metric when it comes to inventory. That is also one of the most challenging ones for brands that are expanding into multiple channels and trying to dial that inventory cost in at the right level, but also make sure that they're not getting penalized by marketplaces because they don't have inventory available, or ultimately just disappointing customers. And then the final one, so beyond the promise metric for customers and inventory health, we really are focused in on this profitability by channel, not just for ourselves internally, but also to expose that and help our clients through that process of getting visibility to understand really where their profitability is by channel. That really can be a challenge, right? Because you need to understand some of the things that are outside of our control on the fulfillment logistics side, like what their marketing spend is and what some of the digital agency spends are. But then once they do have an order drop in a fulfillment warehouse, to really understand, are we getting the productivity on that channel that we expected? And then that final mile cost, like the final mile is so volatile in the sense of being able to get the inventory closer to the customer. That's one way to manage that cost. And then optimizing for speed and cost on every delivery that does hit the actual metric, which the metrics do vary by marketplace. So it's a dynamic thing to track, but it's one that we think if we can help our brand partners figure that out, then they're going to be really successful long term.
I love that. And I think what I like the most about it is the fact that these are, if you think about it, first principles type of metrics. So is the order being delivered, as promised on time and, as expected? Is the inventory health looking good? And then profitability, I mean, that's table stakes. So I love that you're taking the complexity and pairing it with just clear thinking to make sure that you have your bases covered.
And everything that Patrick just said too, like that's not easy. I mean, there are still many 3PLs that have a challenge even reporting their SLAs and SLA performance, right? So when you add some of the complexity you were talking about, Patrick, I mean, my mind was kind of spinning with that actually is far and away above what you see as a norm in the industry. I mean, I know sometimes when 3PLs are preparing for QBRs or annual business reviews, I mean, it's hard to pull some of that information together in those stats because they're in so many different systems and there's different interpretation of all those statistics as well and those metrics. So like, I just see what everything you mentioned just seems like it's taken the basic level of reporting and metrics and just taking it to a 10th degree. So that's really impressive.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Again, we came into this via a way of doing it for ourselves with, our inventory, because at one point in time, Essendant owned, its own inventory and was doing all this for themselves, as well as companies like Staples or other private equity Sycamore backed brands that were in our operation, and they own the inventory. So that, we got to it, through an untraditional route as a 3PL over the last 10 years. But the good news is the strategy is dialed in, and we really feel like we've got our arms around what the most important points are here.
Absolutely. Patrick, would love to hear your thoughts about peak season, any predictions that you might have, any advice you might have for, operations leaders that are listening in, commerce leaders that are trying to plan and trying to figure out how they should be planning for not just peak season, but beyond into 2026. What could you share with them?
Yeah, I'm hopeful at this point in time that there's going to be a lot less chaos this peak season. Uh, and I say that, half joking, but honestly, I think a lot of the supply chain challenges and tariff uncertainty, while it's not perfect and crystal clear, it's certainly not as disruptive as what it seemed like it was going to be, just even 4 months ago. So I think those things are setting up well to where this season, you just look at the next, I think probably really important leading indicator, which is how customers are going to buy. It looks like all retailers, or I should say the largest retailers you probably saw when you turn the news on today, they're already starting their sales. So you could say they're mimicking some of what Prime Day has been now for a few years, but all the large marketplaces, and again, 50% of sales are at least originating on these large marketplaces. So these large marketplaces are starting their sales earlier. I think they are working together to try to change customer behavior, and that's all meant to just flatten out the demand curve and make it less challenging for all of us in this space come Cyber Monday, Black Friday, and all the way through to the Christmas cutoffs. But I'm hopeful that it's going to be less chaotic, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see some flattening of the demand curve this year. And I think there's a lot of really focused efforts to try to make that happen. But again, things could change. As you guys know, it's a very dynamic world that we live in, and there's something that could prove that statement to be totally wrong in 3 days from now.
Oh, ain't that the truth?
So true. It's the world we chose to live in. Listen, Patrick, this has been amazing, very, very informative. Really appreciate your insights. And as we wrap up here, I want to give you the opportunity to share with everyone where's the best place for people to follow you and the work you're doing, and to reach out to Essendant if they'd like to connect.
Yeah, you can just go to Essendant or Essendant Fulfillment Services, and you can certainly find us, and you can read all about our connected commerce strategy. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn and many other social area points of interest. But I really want to just take a minute here to thank you for allowing me to come on the podcast. It's been one that I've followed for many years now, and I think you guys always drive a lot of great thought leadership and insight. So once again, thanks for continuing to chase me down, and it was my pleasure to be here with you guys today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you,
Thank
Patrick.
you. You guys take care.
You too.